"May I have your leftovers, sir?" she breathed, her voice a mere thread in the opulent setting. "I'm not asking for money," she clarified, her tone soft, almost pleading. "Just the food for him." The billionaire, Daniel Thompson, lifted his gaze, drawn from the depths of his solitude. His eyes met hers, and then focused on the infant nestled in her arms, wrapped in a blanket that had seen better days. In that instant, the carefully constructed walls around his heart began to crumble. The restaurant, a haven of hushed elegance, hummed with its usual Wednesday night symphony. A live pianist in the corner poured out melodies that intertwined with the delicate clinking of silverware and the low murmur of conversations from tables draped in crisp linen. The crystal chandeliers, suspended like celestial bodies, cast a golden glow, painting the scene with an illusion of perfection. But Daniel Thompson was far from perfect. He was a man haunted by loss. He sat at his customary table, strategically positioned near the window and discreetly tucked behind a towering arrangement of fragrant lilies. Across from him, the chair that had once been Sarah's, his beloved wife, sat empty, a stark reminder of the void in his life. It had been empty for 4 long years. His gaze drifted to the untouched plate before him, a culinary masterpiece of filet steak, creamy mashed potatoes, and vibrant roasted vegetables. The aroma should have stirred his appetite, but instead, it only amplified the hollowness that had become his constant companion. He swirled the dark red wine in his glass, watching as it caught the light, its ruby hues momentarily captivating. But the fleeting beauty held no solace. Nothing truly mattered anymore. Daniel Thompson was a name synonymous with success. A tech visionary, his face graced magazine covers, and he was a sought-after speaker at industry conferences. But tonight, stripped bare of his accolades, alone at that table, his vast wealth couldn't fill the deafening silence that echoed within him. Sarah, his wife, and Hannah, their bright, vivacious daughter, had been gone for 4 years, victims of a tragic car accident on a rain-slicked highway, a memory he could never escape. His friends urged him to move on, to embrace life again. His diligent assistant kept him occupied with a relentless schedule. But Daniel resisted. He clung to the past, to the memories. This restaurant, this table, this meal. It was his ritual, his way of keeping them alive. Then, just as the rim of the wine glass met his lips, a soft voice sliced through the air beside him, a gentle intrusion, scarcely more than a whisper, yet undeniably clear. "May I have your leftovers, sir?" Daniel froze, his muscles tensing. He slowly turned his head, his eyes landing on her. A young woman stood beside his table, her posture radiating quiet dignity. She appeared to be no more than 19 or 20, her face bearing the marks of hardship. Her coat was thin and worn, offering little protection against the chill of the night, and her shoes were soaked through from the relentless rain. In her arms, she cradled a baby, bundled in a threadbare blanket that spoke of poverty. The restaurant held its breath. The clatter of forks ceased, conversations died, and eyes turned in their direction. A waiter, sensing a disturbance, began to step forward, but Daniel raised a hand, halting him in his tracks. He couldn't explain why, but he felt an undeniable urge to hear her voice again. "Please," she added, her voice laced with a quiet desperation. "Just for the baby." Daniel stared at her, speechless, captivated by her unwavering gaze. There was no fear in her eyes, only a resolute strength, a silent testament to battles fought and survived. And deep within him, something long dormant began to stir. He glanced down at his untouched food, then back at her, and in that moment, the trajectory of his life irrevocably shifted. The silence in the room was profound, amplifying the softest sounds, the distant hum of conversation, the suppressed laughter, the gentle melody from the piano. All faded into insignificance the moment the young woman spoke. Her voice, barely audible, somehow reached every ear in the room. Daniel remained frozen, his fingers still encircling the stem of his wine glass. The girl, young, soaked, and weary, stood before him, cradling a baby pressed tightly against her chest, the infant's face barely visible beneath the folds of a faded pink blanket. Another waiter materialized at Daniel's side, his face etched with concern. "Sir, should I?" Daniel didn't acknowledge him. He simply raised a hand, a silent, decisive gesture. Don't. The girl didn't flinch under the scrutiny. She didn't recoil or back away. Her arms held the baby with a fierce protectiveness, a shield forged from love and a promise of unwavering devotion. Her face was pale, her hair plastered to her forehead by the rain, but her dark, unwavering eyes remained fixed on Daniel's. "I'm not asking for money," she repeated, her voice softening. "Just the food for him." The baby stirred, emitting a tiny, discontented sound, as if weary of waiting. Daniel blinked, as though emerging from a deep slumber. All around them, hushed whispers spread like wildfire. A couple across the room shook their heads in disapproval. Someone scoffed. A man near the entrance surreptitiously pulled out his phone to record the scene. But Daniel was oblivious to the judgment, the whispers, the stares. Not tonight. He looked down at his plate, at the food he hadn't even touched. He looked back up at her, his gaze searching. "What's his name?" Daniel asked, the question surprising even himself. "Junior," she replied, her voice softening. "He's 8 months old." Daniel nodded slowly, a subtle shift occurring within him. Something he hadn't felt in years stirred in his chest, an emotion he couldn't quite define. Perhaps it was her unwavering stance, her quiet resilience. Perhaps it was her manner of speaking, devoid of desperation, filled with a calm dignity. Or perhaps it was the way the baby, little Junior, gazed at the plate of food, as if instinctively knowing it held the promise of relief. Daniel gently pushed the plate toward her. "Take it," he said, his voice barely a whisper. The girl didn't rush. She didn't snatch the plate or burst into tears. Instead, she took a deep breath, reached into the worn bag slung over her shoulder, and retrieved a small cloth napkin, clean but frayed at the edges. With deliberate, careful movements, she wrapped the food inside, treating it as if it were a precious treasure, not discarded scraps. Then, she extracted a plastic spoon from her coat pocket and knelt down right there on the restaurant floor, oblivious to the judging eyes around her. Junior's eyes lit up, sparkling with anticipation. Daniel watched, transfixed, as the young woman scooped a spoonful of mashed potatoes, blew gently on it, and offered it to her son. The baby accepted it with a soft coo, his tiny lips parting as if he were tasting the world for the first time. His little fingers curled, patting her chest in contentment. And then he smiled, a wide, warm, gummy smile that tugged at Daniel's heartstrings. It wasn't pity he felt. It was awe. She wasn't begging. She was nurturing her child, and she was doing it with a grace and quiet strength that surpassed that of most people in the room. As the whispers intensified and judgment permeated the air, Daniel felt something else rising within him. Respect. He couldn't tear his gaze away from her. The girl didn't speak again. She didn't ask for more. She offered no explanation. She simply focused on feeding the baby in her arms with quiet, patient care. Junior cooed softly between spoonfuls, his tiny feet kicking beneath the blanket. The mashed potatoes were warm, and each bite seemed to bring a little more peace to the child's face. His mother, this young woman who had disrupted the tranquility of the city's most exclusive restaurant, never once looked around. She didn't acknowledge the stares or the hushed judgments. Her eyes remained solely on her baby, and Daniel realized something profound. She wasn't ashamed. Her coat was soaked at the shoulders, its seams stretched and unraveling. Her shoes, once white canvas sneakers, were now a muddy gray, coming apart at the edges. Her fingers were reddened by the cold, but her back remained straight, her head held high. There was an inherent strength in her that couldn't be bought or adorned. Not one of the wealthy patrons in that room, not one of the men in their tailored suits or the women adorned in diamonds, carried themselves with half the dignity she possessed in that moment. When Junior appeared satisfied, she stopped feeding him. She didn't keep the remaining food for herself. Instead, She carefully folded the cloth bundle and placed it back into her bag. Her movements were deliberate, almost ceremonial. Daniel noticed how she gently tightened the baby's blanket, brushing his tiny forehead with her thumb. She whispered something into his ear, words that remained unheard by anyone else. Then she stood. She looked at Daniel, and for the first time, their eyes truly met. Her voice was soft, almost swallowed by the ambient hum of the restaurant. "Thank you," she said, the words not merely a polite formality, but an expression of gratitude that emanated from somewhere deep within her, unshaken by adversity. A thank you that carried weight, a thank you that acknowledged more than just a meal. She didn't linger. She didn't lower her gaze. Instead, she turned and walked slowly toward the door, her head held high, her baby cradled securely against her chest. No rush, no shame, just the unwavering steps of someone who recognized the world's harshness, but refused to let it break her spirit. No one stopped her. No one dared. Daniel watched until the glass doors closed behind her, leaving him in stunned silence. For a long moment, he remained motionless, the candle on his table flickering, the wine glass untouched. And in the seat across from him, the ghost of his past seemed to weigh a little less heavily on his soul. The waiter approached his table again, his voice hesitant. "Sir, shall I bring another plate?" Daniel shook his head. "No," he said quietly. She needed that one more than I ever did. And for the first time in years, he truly meant it. Outside, the air was crisp and damp. Rain misted under the streetlights, transforming the pavement into a shimmering silver canvas. Daniel found himself in his car, the engine running, parked across the street from the restaurant. He couldn't recall walking out, his body acting on instinct before his mind could catch up. He wasn't certain why he lingered there. Perhaps it was curiosity, perhaps guilt, or perhaps something else entirely, something he hadn't felt in years, something unfamiliar and unsettling. Then he saw her again. The girl, the baby. She didn't head toward a bus stop or hail a taxi. Instead, she turned down a side street, moving quickly through the drizzle. Daniel waited a few seconds, then pulled out slowly, his headlights dimmed, following at a cautious distance. She walked 2 blocks, then slipped through the rusted gate of an old, abandoned lot. Cracked concrete, weeds sprouting through the fissures, and a collection of dilapidated vehicles sitting like spectral figures in the darkness. She navigated through the maze of metal and weeds until she reached a navy blue sedan tucked away in the far corner. It took Daniel a moment to comprehend what he was witnessing. Home. The car was old and battered, its rear window obscured by a towel pinned at the edges. She opened the back door and ducked inside, cradling the baby close to her chest. A small solar lantern flickered to life, casting a dim, but warm glow within the confines of the car. Daniel remained parked across the street, his engine off, his hands gripping the steering wheel. He could see them through the fogged windows. She sat upright, resting her back against a folded coat. Junior was nestled in her lap, the blanket wrapped around him like a protective cocoon. Then she began to sing. Her voice was soft, the sound barely reaching him even through the stillness of the night. But he recognized the tune. "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine." The baby stirred, emitting a soft gurgle of contentment. Then, that smile again, that wide, gummy, pure smile he had witnessed in the restaurant. The mashed potato smile. Daniel's heart clenched, not with pity, but with a profound understanding. This wasn't a woman begging for charity. This was a mother striving to survive, one spoonful at a time. She wasn't asking for the world. She was asking for a moment, just one moment where her baby could be warm, full, and safe. He watched as she gently laid Junior down on a thin cushion, covering him with the blanket. She sat beside him, her hand resting on his chest, humming softly until the child's eyes drifted shut. Daniel leaned back in his seat, closed his eyes, and exhaled, a breath that felt like the first in years. That simple smile, so small, had torn something wide open within him. He had walked away from love long ago, buried it beneath layers of grief and self-imposed isolation. But tonight, Beneath a gray sky and a flickering streetlight, a baby's mashed potato smile had cracked open the vault of his heart, and he knew, with absolute certainty, that nothing would ever be the same. Daniel didn't sleep that night. He lay awake in his penthouse apartment, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the city skyline, enveloped in sheets that likely cost more than the car she called home, and felt a profound restlessness he hadn't experienced in years. Images replayed in his mind. The baby's small smile, the way she had carefully wrapped the food as if it were gold, her voice as she hummed a lullaby in the darkness. And that car, that old Navy sedan. Sometime around 3 a.m. He rose from his bed, barefoot on the cold marble floors, and stood by the window with a glass of water in his hand. But the city lights offered no solace, only more noise, more empty beauty. He had spent years convincing himself that he was fine, that he had everything he needed, more than enough. But that night, he understood how meaningless it all was if there was no one to share it with. The next morning, Daniel drove back to the lot. He parked a street away, observing the scene through his windshield. The sedan was still there, showing no signs of activity. It was a bitterly cold morning, the breath of passers-by fogging the air as they hurried along the sidewalk. Then, just after 7 a.m., the back door of the car creaked open. She emerged slowly, holding Junior against her chest, wrapped tightly in the same worn blanket. She stretched, rubbed the back of her neck, then crouched down to change the baby's diaper on the car seat with practiced efficiency. Her face bore the weight of exhaustion, not just from lack of sleep, but from the accumulated burdens of her life. Still, she whispered to the baby, smiled at him, and brushed a kiss on his cheek before tucking him into a carrier strapped to her front. Then, she reached into the front seat, retrieved a small plastic tub filled with cleaning supplies and rags, and started walking. Daniel followed at a distance once more. She stopped at a small cafe a few blocks away, where she began scrubbing the windows outside. A man in an apron opened the door and handed her a muffin and a few coins. She thanked him with a nod, took a seat on the curb, and split the muffin in half. One piece for herself, one piece for Junior, mashed gently with her fingers. Daniel sat in his car, his heart heavy with empathy. This was her reality. This was how she survived, one favor at a time, one crumb, one kind stranger, one lucky break. And yet, she didn't complain. She didn't appear defeated. She radiated the quiet strength of someone who had resolved that as long as her baby had food, warmth, and a lullaby, she could keep going. Daniel had witnessed countless entrepreneurs pitch billion-dollar ideas with far less determination. He leaned back in his seat and made a decision. If she wasn't going to ask for help, he would offer it anyway, but he would do it her way, quietly, respectfully, and always with Junior's well-being as the priority. Daniel waited until the end of the day. She returned to the lot around sunset, carrying the same plastic tub, her coat now damp from the mist, her shoulders visibly heavier than they had been in the morning. Junior was asleep against her chest, his tiny hand gripping a loose thread of her scarf. Daniel parked 2 cars away and stepped out slowly, careful not to startle her. As she reached for the car door, she paused, sensing his presence before she saw him. Her back stiffened slightly, her grip on the baby tightening. "I'm not here to bother you," Daniel said gently, "or to take anything." She turned, her eyes guarded but calm. "I just wanted to talk," he added. For a few seconds, the air between them was still, silent, and cold. Then, she gave a tiny nod and leaned against the edge of the car door, shifting the baby's weight in her arms. "You followed me last night." It wasn't an accusation, just a statement of fact. He didn't deny it. "Yes." "Why?" Daniel took a deep breath. "Because I couldn't forget the way your baby smiled after eating those mashed potatoes." That made her blink, momentarily throwing her off guard. She hadn't expected that answer. "What's his name?" he asked again, his voice softer this time. She looked down at the child sleeping on her chest, then back up at him. "Junior." Daniel smiled slightly. "Strong name." She studied him, taking in his tailored coat, his spotless shoes against the gravel. "You're not like us," she said, her tone not bitter, just honest. No, he replied. But I also know what it's like to lose someone, to sit alone with food you don't want, to feel like the world just kept going without you. Her eyes flickered, betraying a hint of surprise. He wasn't lying. I'm Daniel, he said, extending his hand. Ada, she replied, shaking his hand briefly. Daniel nodded. You used to be in school, didn't you? She hesitated, then nodded. Computer science. Before everything. Before Junior. He watched her carefully, then asked, Where's his father? She looked down, her voice barely audible. I met him in school. When I told him I was pregnant, he said he wasn't ready to be a father. Told me to get an abortion. She paused, gathering her strength. But I couldn't do that. I decided to keep the baby. Her voice grew steadier, almost matter of fact. When my parents found out, they cut me off completely. So, I've been raising Junior on my own. Just me and him. Daniel felt a quiet anger simmering within him, not directed at her, but at the immense weight she had been forced to carry, alone. How long have you lived in the car? He asked. Almost 2 months. He looked at the peeling paint, the taped windows, the sagging seats. That's not safe. I know, she said, her voice resigned. But it's warm and it's all I've got. Daniel nodded, understanding. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I'm not offering money, he said quickly, anticipating her reaction. Just this. She took the paper wearily, unfolding it. It was a prepaid room reservation at a modest motel, clean, safe, paid for 2 weeks, no strings attached. I don't want anything from you, Daniel clarified. I just want Junior to have a bed and you to have a break. Ada looked at the paper, then at him, then at Junior. And for the first time, she looked weary enough to say yes. She didn't thank him. She just nodded, her voice barely a whisper. Okay. The motel wasn't luxurious, just a small, 2-story building tucked behind a row of shops, with a faded red sign and a front desk clerk who barely glanced up from his newspaper. But to Ada it felt like a castle. She unlocked the door and stepped into the room. It smelled faintly of disinfectant and old curtains, but the sheets were clean, and the heater worked. Junior let out a tired whimper as she laid him on the bed. She ran her hand gently over his forehead and whispered, It's okay, baby, we're safe. That night, for the first time in weeks, Ada slept lying down, not curled in the back seat of a car, not clutching her baby with one eye open, but on an actual bed, enveloped in warmth and beneath a sturdy roof. And Daniel, he didn't sleep either. Instead, he made a plan. The next morning, before the sun had even begun to paint the sky, he placed a sealed bag at the motel door. Baby formula, diapers, a thermos of hot tea, and a small note that simply said, For Junior. No signature, no expectations. He left quietly, long before she woke, and he continued the practice, day after day. Each dawn brought a new delivery. Clean onesies, a bottle of baby lotion, soft blankets, gentle shampoo. All brand new. All delivered anonymously before sunrise, always without a name. Ada didn't need to ask who was responsible. At first, she was hesitant to accept the help. She was accustomed to disappointment, accustomed to surviving with nothing. But the assistance came without pressure, without questions, without judgment, only silent kindness. And slowly, tentatively, she began to believe that perhaps not everything in the world was designed to break her. Daniel never knocked. He never called. He never requested to see her. He simply showed up through small, consistent actions, always quiet, always intentional. He had built billion-dollar companies by paying meticulous attention to the details. Now, he was applying that same focus to caring for 2 strangers. 1 bottle, 1 spoon, 1 warm blanket at a time. He confided in no one, not his assistant, not his board of directors, not his closest friends. This wasn't about him. It was about the baby, about that transformative moment in the restaurant that had cracked his heart open, about a young woman with weary eyes and an unshakable spirit who had asked for nothing but a chance to feed her child. And the truth was, it filled him with a profound sense of peace, a peace that surpassed any business deal, any headline, any prestigious award he had ever received. The day began like any other. Ada woke early, bathed Junior with warm water from the motel tap, fed him formula from the bag that had reappeared outside the door, and kissed his cheek. The sunlight streamed through the cheap blinds, casting stripes of gold across the bed. Junior was a little fussy that morning, but Ada didn't think much of it. Babies have off days, she reassured herself. She bundled him up and headed to the local laundry shop, where she'd been picking up shifts, cleaning, folding anything that paid. By late afternoon, Junior had stopped smiling altogether. He refused to eat the mashed carrots she warmed in the motel microwave. He whimpered when she attempted to hold him upright, and his forehead felt alarmingly hot. Too hot. Ada checked again, her anxiety mounting. Still burning. Panic began to set in. She soaked a towel in cool water and placed it across his head, singing softly, trying to remain calm for his sake. She rocked him, whispered soothing words, held him close. But by 9 p.m. his fever was soaring. His eyes were glassy, his breathing shallow and rapid. Ada's hands trembled as she wrapped him tighter in his blanket and rushed out of the motel room, grabbing only her phone, a bottle, and a thin jacket. The nearest hospital was a 10-minute walk away, each minute stretching into an eternity. When she arrived, the emergency room was overflowing with patients. The receptionist barely glanced up from her computer screen. "He's burning up," Ada said urgently. "Please, he's only 8 months old. He's not responding properly." The woman sighed, pulled out a form. "Do you have insurance?" Ada hesitated, her heart sinking. "No." The receptionist's expression hardened. "Then you'll have to wait, or go to county." "Please," Ada pleaded, her voice breaking. "He's burning up. Just look at him." "We're full," the receptionist said, her voice cold and final, the tone of someone who had delivered those words far too many times that night. "I'm sorry." Tears stung Ada's eyes. She clutched Junior closer, feeling his limpness in her arms. He was too quiet, too still. She stumbled outside, the cold night air slapping her face. Her fingers trembled as she pulled out her phone, unlocked it, and opened the last message thread she hadn't used in days. 2 words. * help us. She hit send, her hope hanging by a thread. She didn't know if he would respond. Maybe he was busy, maybe he had moved on, maybe he regretted getting involved at all. But 6 minutes later, a black SUV roared into the hospital driveway like a tempest unleashed. The door flew open, and Daniel leaped out, no longer the impeccably dressed billionaire, but a man in a hoodie and jeans, his eyes wild with urgency. He didn't speak. He didn't ask what had happened. He simply held out his arms. Ada, her hands trembling, surrendered the baby to him. Junior didn't cry. He just clung weakly to Daniel's shirt, his tiny hand gripping a button for dear life. Daniel stormed into the ER, heading straight for the reception desk. "This child has a critical fever," he declared, his voice low and controlled, but burning with fierce determination. "Treat him now. I'll pay for everything. If anyone here delays another second, I'll buy this place and fire every last person in it." And just like that, the room snapped into motion. Doctors came running, nurses wheeled out equipment, and Junior was rushed behind the double doors. Ada collapsed into a chair, her body racked with sobs. Daniel sat beside her, offering no platitudes, no empty reassurances. He simply remained present, a silent pillar of support. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to cry, and he didn't utter a single word. He just stayed. The waiting room lights were harsh and unforgiving. The chairs were stiff and uncomfortable. The silence was deafening. Ada sat with her head in her hands, her elbows resting on her knees, her cheeks still wet with tears. Her jacket lay discarded on the floor beside her chair, a silent testament to the emotional turmoil raging within. She remained oblivious to its presence. Daniel sat beside her, a steadfast anchor in her storm. Unlike the other occupants of the waiting room, he wasn't lost in the glow of his phone or pacing nervously, nor did he offer hollow platitudes. He simply existed, a quiet presence close enough to offer reassurance, yet distant enough to allow her the space she desperately needed. It wasn't the kind of silence that demanded answers, a silence thick with unspoken questions. It was the kind that whispered, "I'm here. Take your time. I'm not going anywhere." Time stretched, each second an eternity, until a nurse finally emerged, her face etched with the weariness of her profession. But her words offered a glimmer of hope. "Junior's stable," she announced, her voice a gentle balm. "His fever broke. We're keeping him overnight for observation, but he's going to be okay." Ida exhaled, a long, shuddering breath that betrayed the monumental weight she had been carrying. She hadn't even realized she'd been holding it in, a physical manifestation of her fear. She leaned back against the cold, unforgiving wall, completely drained. Daniel's gaze softened as he looked at her, seeing past the exhaustion to the raw vulnerability beneath. "Do you want me to call anyone?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. She shook her head, a slow, mournful movement. "There's no one left to call," she whispered, the words hanging heavy in the air. A beat of silence followed, thick with unspoken grief. Then, almost as an afterthought, "You came?" He nodded, his eyes conveying a depth of emotion. "Of course I did." Ida turned to him slowly, her face pale and blotchy, her eyes swollen and red-rimmed from crying. Yet, in that moment, Daniel saw a beauty that transcended physical perfection. She was real, worn down, undeniably fragile, but still standing, a testament to her unwavering strength. "I didn't know who else to text," she confessed, her voice barely audible above the sterile hum of the hospital. "I didn't even know if you'd show up." He turned to her, his gaze intense and unwavering. "I didn't know either," he admitted honestly, "until I was already on my way. Something just compelled me to come." A small, tired smile flickered across their faces, a shared moment of understanding. Ida leaned forward again, burying her face in her hands, her body shaking, not with fresh tears, but with the overwhelming relief that washed over her. The knowledge that Junior was safe, that she hadn't lost the only thing that truly mattered. Daniel reached out, his movements slow and deliberate, as if testing the waters, and placed a hand on her back, offering silent support. She didn't flinch, didn't pull away. Instead, she turned toward him, drawn by an invisible force, and allowed herself to collapse against his chest, seeking solace in his presence. She didn't speak, didn't offer apologies for her vulnerability. She simply let go, surrendering to the moment. For the first time since becoming a mother, Ada allowed herself to fall apart, to shed the armor she wore for the world. And Daniel held her, not with pity or obligation, but with a profound sense of understanding, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. He didn't offer empty reassurances. He didn't tell her to calm down. He just let her cry, let her shake, let her breathe, allowing her to feel safe in her unraveling. And somewhere in that moment, somewhere between the quiet hum of hospital machines and the sound of her heartbeat slowly syncing with his, something shifted between them. It wasn't a whirlwind romance, not a dramatic rescue. It was a connection, a quiet understanding forged in the crucible of shared vulnerability. Two people, both broken in different ways, finding a rare and unexpected peace in each other's company. Outside, the night deepened, draping the city in its velvet cloak. Inside, something new began to take root, a fragile seed of hope planted in the fertile ground of shared experience. The photograph surfaced online less than 24 hours later. A grainy, poorly lit shot, captured discreetly in the hushed confines of a hospital waiting room. It showed Daniel Thompson, yes, that Daniel Thompson, the billionaire, holding a woman close just past midnight. Her coat lay wrinkled and forgotten on the chair beside her, a discarded shield. Her eyes were red-rimmed and shadowed with exhaustion. And yet, in that raw, unfiltered moment, nothing else seemed to matter but the way he held her, the way the world had seemingly narrowed to encompass only the two of them. The caption, dripping with sensationalism, read, "Tech mogul's midnight rescue? Who is the mystery woman?" It spread like wildfire, igniting the insatiable curiosity of the internet. Blogs picked it up, their headlines screaming for attention. Gossip sites ran wild with speculation, crafting narratives from thin air. TV morning shows flashed the image between celebrity updates and political debates, reducing a deeply personal moment to a fleeting soundbite. It didn't matter that no one knew the truth, that the reality was far more nuanced and human than the salacious headlines suggested. The internet was hungry for drama, and people, hidden behind the anonymity of their screens, speculated wildly, their words laced with judgment and prejudice. "He's dating a single mother," one comment read. "She planned this, a classic gold digger move. Look at her," another chimed in. "Who even lets a child go that long without care? Neglectful. He's finally moved on from his dead wife." A third offered, a twisted mix of hope and judgment. "She trapped him, must be good at playing the victim." Ada read the comments in silence, each word a tiny shard of glass piercing her heart. She sat on the edge of the cheap motel bed, Junior sleeping peacefully beside her, oblivious to the storm raging outside. The pale glow of her phone screen illuminated her face, highlighting the fear and despair in her eyes. Post after post, headline after headline, each one a little more cruel and invasive than the last, painting her as a scheming opportunist, an unfit mother, a parasite clinging to wealth. She tried to stop scrolling, to escape the onslaught of negativity, but it was like falling into a bottomless hole, each click dragging her further into the darkness. Her hands trembled, her throat tightened with unshed tears. She turned off the screen, plunging the room into near darkness, and sat still for a long time, afraid that even the light might touch her baby with that same poison, that same venomous judgment. When Daniel came by the next morning, 2 coffees in hand, offering a soft knock on the door, he knew something had irrevocably changed the moment she opened it. The vulnerability she had shown the night before had vanished, replaced by a blank mask. Her eyes, once filled with a glimmer of hope, were guarded again, distant, as if they were meeting for the very first time. "I can't do this," she said, her voice flat and devoid of emotion. Daniel froze, his heart sinking. He understood the weight of her words. The insurmountable barrier she felt was now between them. "Ada," he began, reaching for her hand, but she pulled away. "I don't want my son growing up in the middle of some scandal," she continued, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't want him seeing lies one day and wondering if they're true. I don't want him thinking we were a mistake, a footnote in some rich man's life." Daniel placed the coffees down gently on the small table near the door, his movements careful and deliberate. "You haven't done anything wrong," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. "It doesn't matter," she replied, shaking her head, her eyes fixed on some distant point. "People don't care about the truth. They see a photo, a headline, and they decide who you are, what you are, without knowing anything about you." He looked at her, his gaze filled with a mixture of pain and determination, and was quiet for a long time. Then he spoke calmly, his voice resonating with unwavering conviction. "Then let me tell them who you really are. Let me show them the truth." She narrowed her eyes, skeptical. "You mean issue a statement? Hire a PR team to spin this in your favor?" "No," he said, shaking his head. "I mean speak myself. No scripts, no edits, no carefully crafted narratives. Just the truth in my own words." Ada blinked, surprised by his unexpected offer. "On TV, you would do that?" Daniel nodded, his eyes locked on hers. "You trusted me enough to text me when your son was dying, to share your deepest fear and vulnerability. Now I need you to trust me with this, to trust that I can protect you, not with money or power, but with the truth." Ada looked at Junior, curled up peacefully on the bed, oblivious to the turmoil surrounding him, then back at Daniel, her expression unreadable. She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no either. A flicker of hope ignited within her, a fragile ember in the darkness. That night, the world would hear the truth. Not in sensational headlines or distorted captions, but in Daniel's own words, spoken directly from his heart. And in that truth, everything would change. The studio was quiet, a stark contrast to the frenzied activity of the media circus that had been swirling around them. There were no flashy lights, No dramatic music, just a dim, calm space, 2 chairs, and a single camera rolling, capturing every nuance of their conversation. Daniel sat across from the host, a middle-aged woman known for conducting interviews that were honest and insightful, rather than sensational or exploitative. She had promised him one thing: no scripts, no cuts, no edits, just the raw, unvarnished truth. And that's exactly what he had come to give. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what he was about to reveal. "I know why I'm here," Daniel began, his voice steady and resolute. "Not because I'm famous, not because I'm rich, but because a photo went viral, a moment that was never meant to be public, a moment that was stolen and twisted into something it wasn't." The host nodded, her expression neutral, but her eyes conveyed a sense of understanding. She remained silent, allowing him to control the narrative. Daniel looked straight at the camera, his gaze unwavering. "I want to start with something I've never talked about publicly, something that has shaped me in ways I never thought possible. 4 years ago, I lost my wife and daughter in a car crash." The studio fell silent, the air thick with unspoken grief. "I didn't speak about it in interviews," he continued, his voice softer now, tinged with pain. "I didn't cry on camera. I didn't seek sympathy or attention. I just disappeared into my work, burying myself in the endless demands of my company, trying to outrun the grief that threatened to consume me." He paused, gathering his strength, the silence broken only by the soft hum of the studio equipment. "I ate dinner alone every week in the same restaurant, at the same table, the same chair across from me always empty, a constant reminder of what I had lost." A shift in his voice, softer now, laced with vulnerability. "And then one night a young woman walked up to my table. She didn't recognize me. She didn't care about my money or my fame. She simply asked for my leftovers. Not for herself, for her baby." The host's brow softened, her expression now one of empathy. Daniel continued, his voice filled with admiration. "She didn't beg. She didn't cry. She didn't try to make a scene. She simply asked, with a quiet dignity that took my breath away." He paused, the weight of the memory heavy in the air, then said the words slowly, deliberately, emphasizing their profound impact. "May I have your leftovers, sir?" "And in that moment," Daniel said, his voice cracking with emotion, "I saw something I hadn't felt in years. I saw someone fighting to survive with dignity, fighting for her child, not for pity, not for attention, just for one spoonful of food." His voice cracked, but he kept going, driven by a need to set the record straight, to defend the woman who had unwittingly saved him. "She didn't take from me that night. She gave me something. She reminded me that I still had a heart, that I was still capable of caring, of feeling, of showing up for someone who needed me." He leaned forward, his gaze intense and pleading. "Her name is Ada. Her baby's name is Junior. And they're not a headline. They're not a scandal. They're the reason I'm alive again." The host was quiet, her eyes filled with compassion. Everyone in the control room was quiet, captivated by his raw honesty. The internet, not yet watching, had no idea what was coming, no idea that the carefully constructed narrative was about to be shattered. Daniel finished simply, his voice filled with gratitude. "I didn't save her. She saved me." When the interview aired that night, the effect was immediate and profound. The internet, usually so quick to tear people down, began to listen. Really listen. The tide of public opinion shifted almost instantaneously. Mothers shared their stories of struggle and resilience. Single parents defended Ada's choices, recognizing the sacrifices she had made for her son. People who had once judged her harshly now apologized, acknowledging their own ignorance and prejudice. Nurses commented on how many women like Ada fall through the cracks, invisible victims of poverty and societal indifference. Donations flowed quietly to shelters and organizations that supported single mothers. A mother in Kansas even started a support fund in Ada's name, a testament to the power of empathy and understanding. And through it all, Ada stayed silent, allowing Daniel's words to speak for themselves, trusting that the truth would prevail. She remained hidden, shielding Junior from the lingering glare of the spotlight, until the next morning. Daniel was in his office, catching up on the work he had neglected in the wake of the media storm. When he heard the soft knock on the door, his heart skipped a beat. He knew somehow that it was her. He opened the door and there she stood, Junior nestled securely in her arms, her eyes tired, but no longer unsure, no longer guarded. The fear that had clouded her expression had dissipated, replaced by a quiet strength. "I'm not running," she said, her voice clear and resolute. "If you still want us, we're here. We're ready to face whatever comes next. Together." Daniel didn't speak. He simply stepped aside, opening the door wider, inviting her into his world. And for the first time, he didn't just open his door. He opened his heart, his soul, his life. The days that followed were quiet, almost peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos that had preceded them. Daniel had rented Ada and Junior a small, sunlit apartment in a calm part of the city, far from the prying eyes of the paparazzi. It wasn't too fancy, but it was clean and warm, with soft gray walls and a little balcony that caught the morning light just right. She moved in with 2 bags and a baby carrier, carrying everything she owned, everything that truly mattered. But within a week, it looked like home, a haven filled with love and laughter. Baby socks draped over the heater drying after a bath. Junior's colorful drawings taped to the fridge, transforming the mundane appliance into a work of art. The comforting scent of formula, baby lotion, and soft music lingering in the air, creating a symphony of domesticity. Daniel visited every morning, drawn by an invisible force, compelled to be near them. At first, he came with excuses, groceries, medicine, updates from the doctor. But over time, he didn't need excuses. He came just to be there, to listen to Junior babble, to eat toast with Ada in the kitchen, to laugh at the monumental mess a single baby could make with mashed bananas. They didn't talk about what they were, didn't define their relationship with labels or timelines. There were no grand declarations of love, no promises of forever. There was just presence, peace, and something steady growing in the quiet moments between them. A connection that deepened with each shared smile, each stolen glance, each act of kindness. It had been a few months since that fateful night in the restaurant, months since the photograph had turned their lives upside down. Ada and Junior were safe now, secure in their little haven. Their days were calm, their nights quiet. Daniel was still in their lives, a constant presence, gentle, steady, always showing up, always offering his support. Ada had started taking classes again, bit by bit, pursuing her dreams of a better future, while Junior learned how to walk, fall, and laugh his way through everything, his infectious joy filling their lives with light. Ada had started to believe that the worst was behind her, that she had finally escaped the shadows of her past. She was wrong, because one afternoon trouble came knocking, literally. There was a hard knock on the apartment door, sharp and fast, shattering the peaceful afternoon. It made Ada jump, her heart leaping into her throat. Junior was napping peacefully in the bedroom, oblivious to the impending danger. Daniel had just left an hour earlier, after spending the afternoon playing with Junior. She wiped her hands on a dish towel, her movements slow and hesitant, and opened the door slowly, peering through the narrow crack. And there he was, the man she never thought she'd see again, the ghost of her past, resurrected to haunt her present. He was taller than she remembered, still wearing that same cocky smile that used to charm her. But his eyes were colder now, harder, sharper, devoid of any warmth. "Ada," he said, his voice smooth and condescending, as if no time had passed, as if he had every right to be standing on her doorstep. "It's been a while." She couldn't speak at first, paralyzed by fear and disbelief. She just stood there frozen, staring at him as if he were a figment of her imagination, a nightmare come to life. He leaned against the door frame, his posture casual, but his eyes betrayed a simmering anger. "I saw you on the news," he continued, his gaze sweeping over her appraisingly. "You and that billionaire guy. Looks like you've been doing pretty well for yourself." Ada's voice finally came out, barely a whisper, but laced with a steely resolve. "What do you want?" He shrugged, feigning nonchalance, but his true intentions were clear. I want to see my son. Her heart dropped, plummeting into the abyss of despair. No, she said quickly, her voice rising in panic. You gave that up. You told me to get rid of him. You left us, abandoned us without a second glance. He smirked, his expression hardening. That was then. This is now. He's mine too. I have a right to see him. Ada shook her head vehemently, her eyes pleading with him to understand. You don't even know him. You've never even tried to be a father. You didn't want us then. Why do you want him now? I want him now, he said, his voice dripping with malice. Especially since it looks like he's part of something bigger now, a better life. You think you can just erase me from his life? You think you can pretend I don't exist? Ada's hands trembled, her body shaking with fear and anger. You need to leave, she said, her voice gaining strength. You don't belong here. You have no right to disrupt our lives. But he didn't move, his presence a menacing threat. You don't get to tell me what to do. I'm his father, and I'm not going anywhere. Then another voice cut through the air, sharp and decisive, shattering the tense silence. No, you're not. Ada turned, her eyes widening in disbelief. Daniel was standing at the end of the hallway, his face a mask of fury. He had come back, realizing he had forgotten his phone on the counter. He had heard everything, witnessed the encounter that threatened to unravel their fragile peace. He stepped forward slowly, his movements deliberate, his voice low but powerful, resonating with righteous anger. You abandoned them, left them to fend for themselves. You made your choice, and you have to live with the consequences. The man narrowed his eyes, his gaze shifting from Ada to Daniel, assessing the threat he posed. And who are you supposed to be? The knight in shining armor? The rich guy who thinks he can buy everything, even a family? I'm the one who stayed, Daniel said, his voice unwavering. The one who fed him, held him, protected him when he was sick. The one who never walked away. The one who loves him unconditionally. The man scoffed, dismissing Daniel's words with a sneering laugh. You think money makes you his dad? You think buying him toys and paying for his food makes you a father? Daniel didn't flinch, his gaze unwavering. No, love does. And I love him more than anything in the world. That's what makes me his father. The air was tight, heavy with unspoken threats and simmering emotions. Ada stood between them, her body stiff with fear, her mind racing, trying to anticipate the next move. But Daniel gently reached out and touched her arm, his touch a silent reassurance. I've got this, he said softly, his voice filled with tenderness. Trust me, I won't let him hurt you or Junior. Then he turned back to the man, his expression hardening. You have no legal claim, no presence, no relationship. You're a ghost from the past, and you have no right to haunt our present. And if you try anything, if you even attempt to disrupt their lives again, I'll make sure the courts know exactly who you are and who you aren't. I'll expose your abandonment, your neglect, your complete lack of concern for your own child. The man's expression faltered for the first time, a flicker of fear in his eyes. He realized he was outmatched, outmaneuvered, outloved. You don't scare me, he spat, but his voice lacked conviction. Daniel stepped closer, his voice calm, but his words laced with a chilling warning. You should be scared, not of me, but of what you already lost. You should be scared of the love you rejected, the family you abandoned, the son you'll never know. The man looked at Ada one last time, his eyes searching for a sign of weakness, a hint of fear. But this time she didn't look scared. She looked strong, resolute, empowered by the love that surrounded her. She took a deep breath, her chin held high, and said clearly, her voice ringing with unwavering conviction, leave, and don't come back, ever. He left, defeated and humiliated. No more words, no more threats, just silence as his footsteps faded down the hall, a sound that echoed the emptiness in his heart. Daniel closed the door gently behind him, shutting out the darkness of the past. Ada stood still, breathing hard, her hands still shaking, the adrenaline coursing through her veins. He pulled her into a tight embrace, holding her close, shielding her from the lingering fear. "You're safe," he whispered, his voice filled with tenderness. "I promise you, you're both safe. I won't let anything happen to you." That night, Daniel made a decision, a vow to protect Ada and Junior from any future threats. No more chances, no more loose ends, no more lingering doubts. He met with his lawyer the next morning, his determination unwavering. "I want to adopt Junior," he said, his voice firm and resolute. "Legally, officially, as my son. I want to give him my name, my protection, my love, forever." The process took weeks, a whirlwind of forms, interviews, and meetings with social workers, each step a testament to his unwavering commitment. Ada sat through every one of them, holding Daniel's hand, offering her support, her gratitude, her love. And when the final papers arrived, signed, sealed, official, transforming Junior from a child in need to a son cherished, a son protected, a son loved unconditionally, Daniel knelt beside Junior, who was stacking toy blocks in the living room, completely oblivious to the life-altering events that had just transpired. He held out the adoption certificate, his hands trembling slightly with emotion, and said gently, his voice filled with tenderness, "Guess what, buddy? I'm your dad now. Officially, forever." Junior didn't understand the words, but he sensed the joy in Daniel's voice, the love in his eyes. He looked up at Daniel and smiled, that wide, warm, gummy smile, the same one that had started it all, the same smile that had melted Daniel's heart and shown him the way back to life. Ada stood in the kitchen doorway, watching the scene unfold, tears streaming down her face, tears not of sadness, but of overwhelming joy and relief, tears of gratitude for the man who had come into their lives and transformed them in ways she never thought possible. Tears from knowing that no matter what happened, no matter what challenges they faced in the future, her son now had the kind of father she once thought didn't exist, a father who loved him unconditionally, a father who would always be there for him, a father who would protect him from the darkness of the world. And this time, no one could take that away. Not headlines, not fear, not even the past. They were a family, bound not by blood, but by love, a love that had been forged in the fires of adversity, a love that had triumphed over hardship and despair. And that was more than enough. A year later, life looked different, not louder, not grander, just fuller, richer, more meaningful. The headlines were gone, relegated to the dusty archives of the internet. The gossip had faded, replaced by a quiet hum of contentment. And the man who once tried to reclaim what he had so easily discarded had long disappeared, like a shadow chased away by the steady light of love. What remained was something far quieter and far more real, something far more precious and enduring. A life, a family, a beginning. It was a soft spring afternoon, bathed in the golden light of the setting sun. Beneath the generous shade of a wide oak tree in a quiet city park, a small group had gathered, their faces filled with love and anticipation. No cameras, no arches, no orchestras, just a few close friends and family members, people who had witnessed their journey, people who had offered their support, people who had believed in their love. And one little boy in a navy vest and matching bow tie, toddling through the lush green grass with a tiny velvet box clutched tightly in both hands, his face beaming with pride. Daniel stood waiting beneath the tree, wearing a soft gray blazer, the one Ada once said made him look less like a billionaire and more like a man, a father, a husband. His eyes, once hollowed by grief and despair, now brimmed with something else entirely: peace, purpose, light. When Junior reached him, his cheeks round and rosy, his eyes gleaming with excitement, Daniel knelt down and gently accepted the box from his small hands, his touch filled with tenderness. "Thank you, son," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You're doing a great job." Junior giggled and turned back, running toward Ada, who stood barefoot in the grass, her face radiant with joy. Her dress was simple, white, flowing, honest, reflecting the purity of her heart. Her curls were pinned back with tiny wild flowers, the ones Junior had helped pick that morning, a whimsical touch that added to her natural beauty. But it wasn't the dress or the flowers that made her radiant. It was her eyes, alive, steady, safe, filled with a love that shone brighter than any diamond. Daniel turned toward her, his heart overflowing with emotion, and slowly, reverently, sank to one knee, his movements deliberate, his intention clear. And in that moment the world seemed to still, the air filled with anticipation. "I've had everything money could buy," he said softly, his voice resonating with sincerity. "Houses, headlines, a company worth billions, but none of it filled the space inside me. None of it brought me true happiness." He paused, breathing in the weight of the moment, the culmination of their journey, the promise of their future. "I lost my wife. I lost my daughter. And for a long time I thought I'd lost the meaning of life too. I was alive, but I wasn't living. I was simply existing, going through the motions, waiting for the end." He looked at her, really looked at her, seeing past the scars of her past, seeing the strength of her spirit, seeing the beauty of her soul. "Then I met you," he continued, his voice filled with gratitude. "You weren't asking for help. You weren't trying to be saved. You were just trying to feed your baby, fighting for his survival." His voice caught, rich with emotion, tears welling in his eyes. "And somehow, in that moment you fed me too. You reminded me what it meant to be human, what it meant to care, what it meant to love." He opened the box, revealing a simple gold ring, unadorned, understated, a symbol of their quiet, enduring love. No diamonds, no spectacle, just a quiet, enduring promise. "You gave me a reason to stay, a reason to feel again, a reason to believe in the future," he said, his voice trembling, not from nerves, but from overwhelming gratitude. "You gave me a son, a family, a life." His voice trembled, but his gaze remained steady, fixed on hers, filled with unwavering love. "Ada, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life loving you, cherishing you, protecting you? Will you be my wife, my partner, my best friend? Forever?" Tears sprang to her eyes,